Not far from the white cliffs of Dover, in southeastern England, is a set of granite blocks laid into the ground in the shape of a small airplane. When first laid out, the figure sat in a large field overlooking the swift waters that separate Great Britain from Europe. Today the figure is surrounded by aggressive shrubs and tall trees. It marks the exact spot where a lightweight, spindly monoplane landed in 1909. The plane's pilot was Louis Bleriot, the first person ever to safely fly the English Channel. Louis Charles Joseph Bleriot was born in Cambrai, a town in northeastern France, on July 1, 1872. At age 10, he started attending a boarding school in his hometown. In 1887, he moved to an aunt's house in Amiens, about 45 miles south of Cambrai. While there, he studied at a local high school and earned a degree in German and science. In the winter of 1890-91, Bleriot moved to Paris and took entrance exams for the Collège Sainte-Barbe, one of the most renowned schools of higher learning in the French capital. After 3 years of study, he graduated 113th out of 207 students. Bleriot then served a year of military service with the 24th Artillery Regiment in Tarbes, a town in southwestern France. In 1897, he opened an automotive parts store just 3 main blocks from the famed Paris Opera House. He also opened a factory, became the leading maker of automotive headlamps, and sold them to major French car makers. Bleriot's business became so successful that he moved to larger quarters, developed more products, and started selling in England. Back in the 1890s, while still in college, Bleriot had developed an interest in aviation. Despite the success of balloonists such as the Brazilian Alberto Santos Dumont, Bleriot decided that the future of aviation lay with heavier-than-air craft. Like many early airplane designers, he thought that his first plane, the Bleriot Type 1, should imitate the shape of birds. This machine never flew, so he adopted a box kite design for his Type 2 machine, which also failed to fly. His Type 3 and Type 4 machines also failed to leave the ground. In April 1907, his Type 5 machine made several short hops, but then crashed. With his Type 6 machine, Bleriot finally had some success, beginning with short flights that he then lengthened. In October 1908, the London Daily Mail offered a prize of 500 British pounds to the first person who could fly the English Channel. By year's end, no one had crossed the water, so the newspaper raised its prize money to 1,000 pounds. 3 French aviators quickly emerged as the leading candidates for the prize. The first was Count Charles de Lambert, but he withdrew early from the competition. The second, Hubert Latham, was partly of English descent. The third, of course, was Bleriot. On July 19, 1909, Latham took off from France and headed for Dover, England. About halfway across the channel, his engine failed and he had to ditch. Now it was Bleriot's turn to try the feat. On July 25th, just after sunrise, he boarded his plane and took off near Calais, France, in his Type 11 monoplane and headed for Dover. Below in the channel, his wife Alice, on board a French destroyer, followed his progress. For about 20 minutes his flight went well. However, the winds in the channel, often amazingly strong, started blowing his plane north. He finally spied the glorious Dover cliffs and steered back south in their direction. Guided by an acquaintance waving France's tricolored flag, he landed in Northfall Meadow near Dover Castle. Bleriot was safe on English soil just 36 minutes, 30 seconds after takeoff. Citizens of Dover who learned of the touchdown rushed to the landing spot. and started admiring the foreigner who had, in effect, peacefully invaded England from the air. When the French learned of the landing, they were ecstatic. For several days, Bleriot and his wife shuttled by boat between England and France, where they were met by ever larger and larger crowds. Bleriot's flight success led to brisk sales of his monoplane. In the first 2 years after his crossing, he sold over 500 planes throughout Europe and beyond. By 1914, he had sold roughly 400 more units. August of that same year brought the havoc of World War first to the Balkans and then to the rest of Europe. The war also produced major advances in airplane technology, with tens of thousands of units sold. In the war's first year, Bleriot and other French businessmen took over a bankrupt aviation business and quickly made it a leading builder of Allied military aircraft. By April 1916, the company had produced the SPAD-7 to protect Allied observation and bombing missions. By late in the same year, the company had developed an improved version of the airplane, the SPAD-12. And by the spring of 1917, the company had introduced a further improvement, the SPAD-13, one of the greatest Allied fighter planes of World War I. By the summer of 1917, the Allies dominated the skies over Europe, which helped to end the war in about a year. After World War I, the market for aircraft sharply dropped, so Bleriot diversified his business to keep it alive. In France, he tried making a motorcycle, the Touriste, but it failed to sell well. In Great Britain, he created a car delightfully called the Whippet, but it also failed to sell. Shrugging off these failures, Bleriot continued to make aircraft. He converted a two-seater fighter plane, the SPAD-20, into a two-seat passenger plane with an enclosed cabin. This plane, the SPAD-27 limousine, flew people between London and Paris. Bleriot followed up with the SPAD-33, a four-passenger plane, also having an enclosed cabin. Just 6 months later, he introduced the SPAD-46, with bigger wings and a more powerful engine. An even larger plane, the Bleriot 115, had 4 engines, carried 8 passengers, and flew the Paris-London route. In 1926, he introduced a single-seat biplane, the SPAD-61, which set a new world altitude record of 40,809 feet. In that same year, he came out with a large twin-engine fighter, the Bleriot 127. The French government ordered and flew dozens of the planes, but a series of accidents grounded them for good in 1933. Although Bleriot kept designing and introducing ever newer aircraft, his business continued to suffer. He worked long days, read only aviation books, and avoided the theater, cinema, and other social events to which he was no doubt invited. In May of 1927, however, an important aviation event brought him back into public view. That event was, of course, Charles Lindbergh's solo transatlantic flight from New York to Paris. Bleriot knew intimately the dangers inherent in flying over large bodies of water. Lindbergh therefore told his Parisian hosts that the Frenchman he most wanted to meet was Louis Bleriot. When the two flyers met, the Frenchman praised Lindbergh lavishly and embraced him warmly. In 1929, Bleriot introduced another airplane to the aviation world, but the Bleriot 195, a then mammoth plane, never earned a certificate to fly. In 1930, the French Air Ministry chose the Bleriot 110 to try to recover the world flight records for distance and duration. The plane's most prestigious attempt at a record began in the summer of 1933. On August 5th, navigator Maurice Rossi and pilot Paul Cados took off from Floyd Bennett Field in New York, flew across the Atlantic, across France, and then over Austria, Greece, Cyprus, and Lebanon before landing in Rayak, Syria. The flight covered over 5,600 miles in about 55 hours, a record that would stand for 4 years. Despite the success of another aircraft bearing his name, Bleriot continued to endure financial beatings. In 1934, he told the French government that in the preceding 5 years his business had lost over 11 million French francs. Added to these losses was another 8 million francs linked to another big airplane, the twin-engine Bleriot 125. Having two fuselages that looked like Art Deco salons, the 125 yielded no production orders. Bleriot nevertheless continued his intrepid pursuit of bigger and better planes. The Bleriot 5190 cost its builder over 10 million francs. Including 9 tons of fuel and mail, this 4-engine flying boat weighed 22 tons. After multiple flight tests, the plane successfully made dozens of Atlantic crossings. In light of this success, the French Air Ministry ordered 3 more 5190s, but the ministry then canceled the order in June 1935, just 6 weeks after placing it. In the mid-1930s, with the rise of Nazi Germany's Adolf Hitler, Europe once again became dangerous territory. France was swept up in the danger as well, and, during World War II, suffered under Nazi control for 4 years. Louis Bleriot, however, never lived to see the horrors and destruction of that war. On August 1, 1936, at age 64, he died at home after suffering a heart attack. The great French aircraft designer, builder, and flyer is buried in the Bleriot family plot in Versailles.